On July 30th, 1942, a German submarine fired a single torpedo into a passenger ship carrying 407 people through the Gulf of Mexico. The SS Robert E. Lee, bound for New Orleans, took the hit just aft of the engine room. She sank in 15 minutes. 25 people died, including passengers who had already survived being torpedoed once before. But the submarine that fired that torpedo would not survive the hour. Lieutenant Commander Herbert Claudius, commanding the escort vessel USS 566, turned toward the torpedo wake and gave chase. His lookouts spotted something extraordinary. The German submarine's periscope had broken the surface at 2,000 yards, the commander rising to observe his kill. Claudius raced over the position. His sonar operators established contact at 250 yards, then at 120 yards. He dropped 10 depth charges in 2 attack runs, bracketing the submarine at multiple depths. When the explosion settled, a 200-foot-wide oil slick spread across the surface. Claudius returned to port and filed his report. He was certain he had destroyed the submarine. The United States Navy told him he was wrong. They stripped him of his command. They sent him back to training school. And they gave the credit to someone else. For 72 years, Herbert Claudius was remembered as the captain who thought he sank a U-boat but did not. This is the story of how an oil pipeline proved him right. Herbert Gordon Claudius was born October 14, 1907, in Omaha, Nebraska. He graduated from the University of California, Berkeley in 1930 and commissioned as an ensign in the Naval Reserve through the ROTC program. For the next decade, he served in reserve billets in San Francisco, working his way through division officer and executive officer posts. When war came, Claudius went on active duty. He was 34 years old when he took command of the newly commissioned USS 566 on June 15, 1942. The ship was a PC-461 class submarine chaser, one of 343 built during the war. She measured 173 feet long, displaced 280 tons, and carried a crew of 65 men. Her armament included a 3-inch gun, depth charge projectors, and approximately 30 depth charges. There was one critical problem. By July 30, 1942, PC 566 had been in commission for only 6 weeks. Neither Claudius nor his crew had completed formal anti-submarine warfare training. They were learning on the job in the deadliest waters in America. To understand what Claudius was facing, you need to know what was happening in the Gulf of Mexico in the summer of 1942. Since January of that year, Germany had been waging Operation Drumbeat, a U-boat offensive against the American coast. German submariners called it the Second Happy Time. It was a slaughter. Between January and August 1942, U-boats sank 609 Allied ships along the American coast and Caribbean, totaling 3.1 million tons. More than 5,000 merchant seamen and passengers were killed, more than twice the death toll at Pearl Harbor. Historian Michael Gannon called it America's second Pearl Harbor. American defenses were catastrophically inadequate. Coastal cities refused to black out their lights. Ships sailed marked routes with navigation lights on. U-boat captains surfaced at night and picked off silhouetted targets at leisure. In the Gulf of Mexico specifically, 24 U-boats entered the theater during the war, sinking approximately 56 ships. Peak activity hit July 1942, with up to 6 submarines operating simultaneously. The carnage was severe enough to accelerate construction of the Big Inch pipeline from Texas to New Jersey, reducing dependence on tanker shipping through the Gulf. This was the killing ground where Herbert Claudius and his untrained crew went hunting. The submarine lurking near the mouth of the Mississippi was U-166, a Type 1 Tex C U-boat measuring 252 feet long and carrying 52 crew. Her commander was Hans-Günther Kuhlmann, a 28-year-old German naval officer and former merchant marine on his first combat patrol. U-166 had departed Lorient, France on June 17, 1942, sailed across the Atlantic, through the Florida Straits, and into the Gulf. Her patrol had produced mixed results. A failed 6-torpedo attack on a convoy where all 6 missed. The sinking of 3 small vessels, including a Dominican schooner, an American freighter, and a fishing trawler. On the night of July 24th, she laid 9 mines off the southwest pass of the Mississippi River. None of them ever detonated. By July 30th, U-166 was patrolling operational area DA-90, covering the mouth of the Mississippi. She was about to claim her 4th and final victim. The SS Robert E. Lee was a 5,184-ton steam passenger ship built in 1924. She measured 375 feet long and was carrying 407 people that day. 131 crew, 6 Navy armed guards, and approximately 270 passengers. Many of those passengers were survivors of previous U-boat sinkings being transported back to the United States. 28 men came from the torpedoed Andrea Brovig and 44 from the Stanvac Palembang. People who had already survived one submarine attack were sailing straight into another. On the afternoon of July 30th, 1942, in clear weather and smooth seas, the 2 vessels were approximately 45 miles southeast of the Mississippi River Delta. At approximately 4:30 in the afternoon, U-166 fired a single torpedo. Lookouts spotted the torpedo wake at 200 yards, too late for evasive action. The torpedo struck the starboard side just aft of the engine room, destroying the number 3 hold, buckling decks, and wrecking the engines. The Robert E. Lee listed to port, then to starboard, and sank by the stern in approximately 15 minutes. Survivors abandoned ship in 6 lifeboats, 8 rafts, and 5 floats. 25 people died, 10 crew members, and 15 passengers. The remaining 382 survivors were rescued by PC-566 and other vessels and transported to Venice, Louisiana. If you want to see how this 72-year mystery finally gets solved, hit subscribe. I cover forgotten military investigations like this one every week. Now, here is where Herbert Claudius made history that no one believed. PC-566 was positioned approximately 1,000 yards forward of the Robert E. Lee when the torpedo hit. Claudius reacted immediately. He turned toward the torpedo wake and gave chase back along its track. His lookouts spotted U-166's periscope breaking the surface at approximately 2,000 yards. The submarine was rising to observe the sinking. PC-566's approach vector was outside the periscope's field of view. As the periscope retracted, Claudius raced over the position. Sonar contact was established at 250 yards, then confirmed at 120 yards. First attack run. 5 depth charges. A 250-foot set charge rolled from the aft rack as PC-566 crossed the U-boat's path at a 45-degree angle. 6 seconds later, a 100-foot charge from the aft rack and 2 150-foot charges launched from K guns, port and starboard. 6 seconds after that, another 250-foot charge. The pattern was designed to bracket the submarine at multiple depths. 10 minutes later, sonar relocated the submarine on a northern heading, fleeing. Second attack run. 5 more depth charges. Claudius reversed course, re-established contact, and dropped an identical 5-charge pattern. 10 depth charges total across 2 runs. 2 additional passes yielded no sonar contact. The submarine was gone. Post-attack, PC-566 observed a 200-foot wide oil slick. However, the water was fouled with debris from the sinking Robert E. Lee, making it impossible to isolate definitive evidence of a submarine kill. There were no hull fragments, no bodies, no conclusive proof. Claudius reported he was certain the submarine had been sunk, or so mortally wounded, that she would never return to base. What actually happened on the seafloor would not be known for another 59 years. One of PC-566's depth charges had landed directly on the submarine's forward deck, above the compartment where spare torpedoes were stored. As U-166 descended to evade the attack, the depth charge detonated, breaching the pressure hull and triggering a catastrophic chain reaction with the submarine's own torpedoes. The bow was blown off. U-166 broke in two. The submarine plummeted to the seafloor nearly a mile below, landing upright in a 6-foot-deep impact crater. All 52 crew members died instantly. As historian Martin Morgan later put it, they were obliterated before they even knew what was happening. But no one knew any of this. When Herbert Claudius returned to port with the Robert E. Lee survivors and filed his after-action report claiming the U-boat kill, the commander of the Gulf Sea Frontier rejected it. The official assessment was devastating. The criticisms were specific. Claudius had broken radio silence twice before the engagement, once requesting permission to divert to New Orleans, once advising arrival time. He was not in the proper patrol station, and no proven system of attack was followed. The official conclusion stated that it was not considered probable that any except minor damage could have been sustained by the submarine. The consequences were immediate and humiliating. Claudius was stripped of command of PC-566 and sent to the Submarine Chaser Training Center in Miami for anti-submarine warfare instruction, training he and his crew had never received before being thrown into combat. As U-boat historian Richie Kohler later summarized, Claudius was shafted. He should have returned home a hero, but he was humiliated and sent back to school. 2 days after Claudius dropped his depth charges, on August 1, 1942, a Coast Guard J-4F-1 Widgeon amphibious seaplane spotted a surfaced submarine approximately 100 miles south of Houma, Louisiana. This position was roughly 130 miles west of where PC-566 had engaged U-166. The pilot, Chief Aviation Pilot Henry Clark White, circled for a stern attack. The submarine began a crash dive. White released a single 325-pound aerial depth charge from 250 feet altitude. His crewmen estimated it entered the water approximately 20 feet from the submarine's starboard side. A large geyser erupted. Afterward, a medium-sized oil slick was observed. White was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. His crewmen received the Air Medal. They were credited with sinking U-166. They had attacked the wrong submarine. After the war, the Anti-Submarine Warfare Assessment Committee reviewed the fate of every U-boat using captured German records listing missing submarines with dates matched against Allied attack reports. U-166 had failed to answer her radio and was declared missing in action on August 1, 1942, the same day as the Coast Guard aircraft attack. The dates lined up. The general area matched. To the assessors, it was a neat and tidy package. What the assessors did not know was the existence of Ultra, the British decryption of German radio communications, which remained classified until 1974. An Ultra decrypt dated July 30, 1942, estimated 2 enemy submarines patrolling off the Mississippi Delta Gulf Coast area. There were 2 U-boats, not one. U-166 and her sister ship, U-171, were operating simultaneously in the Gulf. The submarine White actually attacked was U-171. After the war, U-171's surviving commanding officer reconstructed his patrol logs from memory during post-war interrogation and described being attacked by a flying boat that dropped a single depth charge that shook up the boat but did no damage. U-171 escaped. She went on to sink 3 more ships before being lost to a mine in the Bay of Biscay in October 1942. The Widgeon aircraft was later preserved and displayed at the National Museum of Naval Aviation in Pensacola, Florida, with a placard crediting it with sinking U-166. The wrong men had been decorated. The right man had been punished, and the official record stayed that way for 7 decades. Despite the Navy's rejection of his kill claim, Herbert Claudius's career was not destroyed. He went on to command the gunboat USS Haste, the destroyer escorts USS Austin and USS Runels, and the destroyer USS Floyd B. Parks, which he took into Korean War combat. He earned the Legion of Merit for shore bombardment operations in Wonsan Harbor. He was promoted to commander in August 1943, transferred from the reserve to the regular Navy in July 1946, and made captain in July 1951. He retired on July 1, 1963, after 33 years of naval service. But through all those years, the question lingered. When family members asked if he had ever sunk a submarine during his decades in the Navy, Claudius would say he thought he did once, modest, uncertain, but unwavering. As his son later wrote, the young Captain Claudius and his crew always suspected that they had sunk the only U-boat ever sunk in the Gulf of Mexico, but they never knew for sure, and they were never given credit for it. Herbert Claudius died on July 31, 1981, on a golf course in San Diego, California. He was 73 years old. He suffered a massive heart attack, and his son later recalled he was gone before he hit the ground. He died 20 years before the wreck discovery that proved him right. In 1986, Shell Offshore contracted a deep-tow sonar survey in the Mississippi Canyon area. 2 shipwrecks were detected in approximately 5,000 feet of water and tentatively identified as the SS Robert E. Lee and a cargo freighter called the Alcoa Puritan. The 2 wrecks were detected. The second wreck was U-166. It sat on the Gulf floor for 15 more years, misidentified. In January 2001, C&C Technologies of Lafayette, Louisiana, was contracted by BP Exploration and Shell International to survey the route for the Okeanos gas pipeline, a $150 million project to carry natural gas from ultra-deepwater fields. They used a Hugin 3000 autonomous underwater vehicle, the first commercial deep-water AUV in the Gulf of Mexico. Marine archaeologists Robert Church and Daniel Warren processed the data. They found the Robert E. Lee. And they found a second area of wreck debris less than 1 mile away. The combined length of the second wreck's 2 sections was 255 feet, far too small for the 397-foot Alcoa Puritan, but almost exactly consistent with a Type 1X CU boat at 252 feet. Warren recalled that they were expecting to see the remains of a 6,000-ton tanker, but what they actually saw was a much smaller target, a cigar-shaped target. It was clearly smaller. On May 31, 2001, they dispatched a remotely operated vehicle, an ROV. The footage was unmistakable. A conning tower, a 105mm deck gun, anti-aircraft weapons. It was U-166. And given the location, less than 1 mile from the Robert E. Lee and 130 miles east of where the Navy said U-166 had been sunk, there was only one possible conclusion. Herbert Claudius had been right. 3 pieces of evidence proved it. First, location. U-166 was found exactly where PC-566's engagement took place, 45 miles southeast of the Mississippi Delta, and 130 miles east of where the Coast Guard plane attacked. A submarine sunk near Homa would not be found near the Delta. Second, proximity to victim. The wreck lay less than 1 mile from the Robert E. Lee, consistent with being destroyed immediately after torpedoing its last victim, not wandering 130 miles west over the next 2 days. Third, damage pattern. The bow had been catastrophically severed from the main hull, showing massive crushing damage to the deck area consistent with a depth charge detonation directly on the hull. Not a near miss. Not an aircraft bomb pattern. A surface-delivered depth charge struck the forward deck above the torpedo storage compartment. The resulting detonation of U-166's own torpedoes blew the bow off. On June 8, 2001, BP, Shell, and the Minerals Management Service held a press conference announcing the discovery. The pipeline was rerouted around the site to preserve both war graves. But even after the 2001 discovery made the truth obvious to historians, archaeologists, and U-boat experts, the Navy did not correct the record. The wreck was studied in detail during a 2003 NOAA archaeological expedition. A Homa historian named C.J. Christ, who had spent more than 30 years researching U-166, pushed relentlessly for correction. The evidence was overwhelming. The Navy did nothing. It took Robert Ballard. In the summer of 2014, Ballard's exploration vessel Nautilus returned to U-166 for high-resolution remotely operated vehicle mapping. Richie Kohler was aboard as the U-boat expert. As Kohler recounted the full story of Claudius's humiliation, Ballard asked whether the Navy had ever corrected the record. When Kohler told him they had not, and that 13 years after the wreck was found the official record still credited the Coast Guard aircraft, Ballard picked up a satellite phone and called Admiral Jonathan Greenert, the Chief of Naval Operations. Greenert promised to look into it. The Naval History and Heritage Command conducted a formal historical and archaeological assessment, producing a report dated November 14, 2014. The report cited sufficient evidence that the Coast Guard aircraft had attacked but failed to sink U-171, and it recommended that PC-566 be credited with the sinking of U-166. On Tuesday, December 16, 2014, Secretary of the Navy Ray Mabus and Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Jonathan Greenert stood at the Pentagon. Herbert Gordon Claudius Jr. stepped forward. They presented him with the Legion of Merit with Combat Phi device, awarded posthumously to Lieutenant Commander Herbert G. Claudius of the United States Naval Reserve for heroism in combat 72 years earlier. Mabus said 70 years later, "We now know that his report after the action was absolutely correct. His ship did sink that U-boat, and it is never too late to set the record straight." Gordon Claudius said his father would have felt vindicated, not for the medal itself, but for changing naval history. That is something not done very often. Robert Ballard told NBC News there was not a dry eye in the house. U-166 lies designated as a war grave at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. 52 men are entombed in the wreck. The German government requested the site remain undisturbed. The wreck was added to the National Register of Historic Places on December 7, 2018, jointly listed with the SS Robert E. Lee. Hans Gunther Kuhlmann was 28 years old when he died. His total combat record across one patrol was 4 ships sunk, totaling 7,593 gross register tons, plus 9 mines laid, none of which ever detonated. His previous command had sunk in a training accident. His torpedo attack on his first convoy missed entirely. 6 torpedoes, 0 hits. He never saw the depth charges coming. Germany knew U-166 was lost, but never knew the specific circumstances. The submarine simply stopped answering its radio. Herbert Claudius spent 39 years, from the day the Gulf Sea Frontier rejected his claim in August 1942 to his death on a San Diego golf course in July 1981, living with the knowledge that he had done something extraordinary and been told he was wrong. The Navy's reasons for dismissing him were rooted not in evidence, but in institutional embarrassment. An untrained crew on a 6-week-old ship had no business sinking a U-boat, so the brass decided one had not been sunk. The Coast Guard's claim was neater and tidier, and it came from an established patrol squadron rather than an unschooled reservist. What makes this story resonate beyond military history is the mechanism of the error. The Post-War Assessment Committee lacked access to ultra-intelligence. Classified until 1974, that would have revealed 2 U-boats in the area, not 1. They relied on date matching. U-166 missing August 1st, Coast Guard attack August 1st, case closed. The actual kill on July 30th by an untrained crew aboard a patrol craft did not fit the narrative. Bureaucracies prefer clean stories, and Claudius's inconvenient truth was filed away for 7 decades. The vindication came through an improbable chain. A Shell survey in 1986 misidentified the wreck. A BP pipeline project in 2001 accidentally found the truth. A Homa historian spent 30 years pushing for answers. An ROV captured footage no bureaucrat could deny. And finally, a famous oceanographer picked up a satellite phone and called the Chief of Naval Operations because he thought it was wrong that nobody had bothered to fix the record for 13 years after the proof was lying on the seafloor. Claudius never got to say "I told you so." His son said it for him at the Pentagon, 72 years late, holding a medal earned in the dark waters off the Mississippi Delta by a man who did his job, reported what happened, and was told he was a liar. Some stories take 72 years to finish. If this story moved you, do two things. Hit subscribe. I tell stories like this every week, forgotten military histories that deserve to be remembered. And drop a comment telling me whose story I should cover next. There are thousands of cases where the official record got it wrong, whose story deserves to be told. This was Lieutenant Commander Herbert Gordon Claudius, USS PC-566, the only U-boat kill in the Gulf of Mexico, finally credited.